Welcome to Doing It Differently, Ashley. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. It's so amazing to be here.
And everyone watching, this is the Queen Corporate Dropout. So for those of the, everyone watching or listening who haven't heard of you, I'd love if you could just tell them what you do, what your mission in the world is.
Yeah. So basically, I bust bitches out of corporate America. That's like the easiest way to put it. And by bitches, I mean lovingly, of course, women who are just sick and tired of living a life that feels so like forced by burnout, by overworking, and then really just want to utilize the skill sets that they've built in corporate America in the entrepreneurial space. And so a lot of my clients are women who have like digital marketing background, copywriting background. I do support some coaches, but a lot of like done for you service providers. And it's really focused around kind of that beginner aspect of creating your business and really getting them really clear on how to actually go find clients, make money, and then most importantly, match their corporate salary so they can leave corporate America for good.
I love that. And I know that that's kind of the epitome of doing it differently, is like having the courage to really let go of the perceived comfort and safety and security of a 9-to-5 role to go after your dreams, to be an entrepreneur. And so I'd love to hear your story. What drew you to this path?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And what you said, you kind of almost teed it up perfectly, was you said it, this perceived sense of like safety. And so, I did it all the regular way, right? So I went to college, I got a master's degree, I found my partner, I got married, bought the house, got the dog, had the baby, and then went through like a fucking midlife crisis.
Okay.
Quarter life crisis, really. And it was all because I was just exhausted. I was really burnt out, and I had made my way to like this place that I thought I was going to feel really good at. And actually, it felt really bad. It actually felt like I couldn't keep up. I couldn't manage my mental state. I was really struggling. I had a newborn at the time that I decided to quit corporate America. And I had this moment where I was in San Francisco on a client visit, and Frontier lost my bag. And in that bag was all of my breastfeeding stuff, right? Like my pump, like all the things. I was mortified because I was going to be shipping breast milk back to my baby so that he could eat while I was gone.
Yeah.
And I just distinctly remember like when they lost that bag, I was like, I cannot fucking do this anymore. Like, this is too much. It's too much of a toll on my family. It's too much of a toll on me. I was traveling multiple times a week. So I would like leave at 5 a.m. and then get back at like midnight. Like I would try to like just do my trips in one day, but it just didn't work. And unfortunately, my employer at the time, they required us to travel. There was no option of remote working. They really felt like it was important to be in front of your clients, which, whatever, but like I did it and it was just too hard. And so I just made the decision to leave, and it was really hard. I didn't really have a plan when I exited corporate America. I mean, I kind of had like some savings, and there wasn't like a next step. I mean, my husband had a business at the time, so I was, thinking like, oh, I'll just use my skills to help him develop his business. But I quickly realized that it just like wasn't my jam. It wasn't what I wanted to do. And so actually what I ended up doing for the first 6 months of my like entrepreneurial journey was rest. I slept, and I realized that I was, quickly going into like a major identity crisis because I really didn't know, who I was outside of corporate America, which is kind of like what they do. It's like, that's the point. They want you to feel really like reliant upon them. And so I spent 6 months just kind of resting. We ended up moving to Colorado for the year and sold all of our shit. We really just did it up. We were like, you know what? We're really going to do shit differently. Not only am I going to quit my job, we're going to move, we're going to sell our house. And then shortly after we moved to Colorado, we realized like how fucking expensive it was to live there. And we were like, well, I'm not bringing any income in right now. I can't keep paying these prices. And so then came bus life, which was really short-lived because we had a small child. I think we did it for like 4 months, and that was also right around the time that I was starting to build my business. And so it was crazy. We ended up moving back to my hometown of Omaha, Nebraska after living the bus. And yeah, ever since then, I've just been building up my company, which is called Embracing the Uncertain, and just kind of like finding my own way. Like there wasn't really like this, like I didn't know immediately what I was going to do. I mean, I even started like writing resumes for a little while. Like that was like my side hustle while I was building my business. So it's been all over the place. It's been a wild ride, to say the least.
There's like a couple things I want to thank you for that. I just want to start with the first 6 month being rest, because that I'm like, oh man, I can imagine that so many people who are in corporate America are like, oh my God, what would it be like to just be able to rest for 6 months? But also what that implies, that you needed to rest for 6 months because work in this 9 to 5 job took such a toll.
Yeah.
And did you have to what did you have to I'm imagining, and maybe this wasn't the case, that you had to work through maybe some conditioning around what it means to just allow yourself to rest instead of feeling like you have to hustle and go.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned that because 100%. I actually felt bad. I was like, I'm lazy. Nobody like, as a matter of fact, like when I was on the way out of my 9 to 5, like people had expressed a lot of concern for me. And I was like, I'm just gonna go rest. And they're like, what? You're just resting? And I'm like, yeah, I need time. I need to just decompress. And, there was a lot of, not only was I resting, but I was like now a full-time mom instead of like a career person, which I'd never wanted to be. So I actually like went through a very serious bout of depression during those 6 months. And to be fully transparent with you, Anne, I didn't really have a ton of personal development work under my belt at that time.
Yeah.
But I knew that intuitively I felt called to do something different. So I just kind of like trusted that this is where I was supposed to be. And I went on, like during that 6 months, I went on a yoga retreat to like this area called Holbox, Mexico, which is like incredible and super, super beautiful. And there in Holbox, I had a shamanic breathing experience with a teacher that I know from South Dakota. And I just went into a full state of panic and like walked into the ocean after this breathing experience and just left all of the fear, all of the burnout in the ocean. And it was like such a beautiful experience. It was almost like what we know now as like a boss bitch baptism, it was like, I'm going to leave this here and I'm going to step into this new version of myself. But it was like, that was truly like the beginning of my healing process. And for this first 6 months, I was literally just like sleeping and trying to be a mom. And it was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I just felt tingles. I was like, wow, that's so beautiful. Like that's really, I think there's something so sacred about having a ritual kind of around closing one part of our lives and opening up to what our future could be. And also like the water being in nature. Oh, that's so beautiful. Like I can imagine that was a really powerful experience for you.
It really was. And I'd never experienced something so deeply healing like that. So I had known like as soon as I did that, that was like the game changer for me. I was immediately ready to kind of like figure out what my next steps were and really like go back to Colorado to create what I wanted to create.
Yeah. And then I had another, when you were talking about your whole journey, so you're a new mom, you quit your job, then you guys moved to Colorado, then you do van life. So obviously the baby came first, but was you quitting your job kind of the domino effect of everything else? Like, we're just gonna fucking do everything differently.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm lucky that my husband is very supportive of like big change like that. Cause I think that's like a big part of this, right? If like he wasn't supportive, I don't know that I could have done it, but he always has this belief of like, we don't have to conform to like what society thinks we should be doing. And especially if you're fucking miserable. And I was miserable. I was coming home every day in tears about how difficult my job was and how hard it was for me to hit my number and this insurmountable amount of pressure on myself, right? And yeah, it was the catalyst, and it had to be, because I had to be able to leave everything behind so that I could build something new. So it was like that foundation truly crumbled, which is like why I went through an identity crisis, because everything I had known prior was so tied to the success that I had in my corporate job.
Mm, yeah. And I imagine there's a lot of people listening or watching that like feel that, one of the most common questions we get when you first meet people is, what do you do?
Yeah.
And so it kind of becomes this, oh, you are attached to your job being this huge part of your identity. What helped you kind of release some of the meaning that maybe your job had been giving you, or to find new meaning? Maybe I should say that.
Yeah, that process took a really long time for me, but it took me being a part of a group of women that do things so differently for me to feel safe that it's okay, right? And I honestly think that, like, even for the first 6 months that I opened my business, I didn't really own what I was doing either, right? Like,
Mm,
it probably wasn't until, like the end of 2019 that I was really owning what I was doing. And even now, I'm still learning how to own it, because this process is just, at every level it just gets a little bit harder, like, to own, because you're like stepping into new versions of yourself that you've
yeah.
never even dealt with before. So yeah, I think I had a really hard time owning anything in the beginning, because I wasn't sure of like what people were going to think and what this new version of me meant. And to be honest, like, I was like, oh, people are going to say that I am, like, my business is cute, how cute that it is that I think that I could match my corporate salary doing coaching, right? Or like, I was fearful that people would think I was like a network marketer, and it's like, well, no, that's not what I'm
Mm,
saying. And no shade to network marketing, I think it's
yeah.
great if that's your jam, but like, I wanted to build something that was really empowering, but in a different way from that.
Yeah.
So, just owning anything was really hard for a long time. But I think once I saw that other women were doing what I wanted to do, it sort of gave me that permission slip, and it gave me that evidence that I needed to keep going and to keep following this path.
I love that. And I've experienced the same. I mean, obviously, we're in a mastermind together, and it's helped me keep going and see that success is possible and be super inspired
Yeah.
by all these people doing it differently. And it can be hard when, maybe your surroundings or everyone reflecting back to you is kind of doing it the way you've always been doing it. And so you're like, you kind of question, can you do it differently? Can I be successful? And so to have people around you doing it, you're like, fuck yes, if they can do it, I can do it. And that is so powerful to have that evidence in front of you.
Yeah, especially when, like, some of the people that might be reflecting like their own fear about you being an entrepreneur, like your family and your closest friends, like, those are the people that are supposed to have your back. Those are the people that are supposed to believe in you unconditionally. And I'm sure that I do believe that most of the time when our families like question our decisions, it's coming from a good place, but also it creates a little bit of doubt that can sort of start to spider into your brain. And especially if you're in a really like new place in your business, you're very fragile, and you're very like, it's really important to protect your energy. And sometimes that can be difficult when your family and when the people you love and trust are like questioning your decisions. And I felt that way for sure. But being a part of like a mastermind or having my own coach has really made the shift for me, because it just makes things like better. You just feel so much more founded, I guess. Like, oh, okay, it's fine. We're gonna live through this.
Well, yeah, because you have someone reflecting back to you that you can do this, right? Even when you want to falter, even when you have compassionate people in your life from a good place asking you questions that also like might be something you should think about, but you're like in so much, like, you're so tender that any question feels like almost like an attack, like, you don't believe in me, and they're like, that's not actually where I'm even coming from. But to have people around you kind of get that you're so tender and really just show you unconditional support until you're ready for maybe the probing questions that will help you, you know, up level. But there's kind of these phases, when you're in this baby infant, you're just getting your legs. You're like, I don't need any questions. I just need unconditional support and cheering on. And then once you have your legs, then it can be like, oh, some questions are asked around, where do you want to go next? Or what is your goal here? And could you be doing something in slightly more impactful way? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like, you know, as part of like being as part of a mastermind or being in like a coaching container, that's like the beautiful thing about it is that when you're tired and when you can't hold your vision, your coach does. And that's
Mhm.
what I think our coach does really well is she's like, I'll hold it for you until you're ready to take it over. And, you know, that's just, it's so invaluable when you're a new entrepreneur. Like I can't even like imagine where I would be if I didn't sign up and do the things that I'm doing now. Even continued a year later or a year and a half later after I started working with her. Like, where would I be if I didn't have this support? I probably would have quit and went back to corporate America, honestly.
Yeah. And this is reminding me that I wanted to ask you this question because I think you've talked to this before, but I'd love for this audience to hear. You have a lot of people come to you and they want a strategy, like a laid out roadmap from how do I leave corporate America, right? Like, because that feels like, okay, this is what I need to do. And I'd love to hear just kind of the fears that people most commonly come to you with about leaving. And then maybe the answers that they're not expecting, you know?
So good. Yeah. Okay. So the most common questions I get are, how do you make money? Do you quit like cold turkey or should I have a plan? What about insurance is probably the number one question I get. And then where do I find my clients? Like, so those are like the main things.
Okay.
And like the funny thing about this entire process is that none of those like all of those questions are so easily figured out once you have the mindset behind action, right? If you are trying to take action but you're still dealing with an identity crisis, no amount of action is going to push you into matching your corporate salary and being able to exit. And so, you know, I tell people like, yeah, I'll give you the plan, but that doesn't mean you're going to go exit it. And actually, they have a free workbook that literally walks people verbatim through what they need to do. And I find that they don't actually take action. And it's really literally because the mindset piece is not there for them. They don't trust themselves. They don't trust that they can build a business. They have so much self-doubt. And so every single thing that I do and everything that I teach around corporate, being a corporate dropout is how I like to call it, like everything stems from mindset first, because the process and the strategy after added to the mindset makes the process so much easier. And it's funny because I've given people the laid out plan. Like I've had intensives in the past where people are like, yeah, I want to make a plan together. We'll walk through the strategy together. I'll follow up with them 6 months later and they still haven't left. And it's because they haven't put in the work on the mindset. They've done the strategy, but all of those fears and doubts creep in and they don't know how to handle it. And so that's why I sort of like to arm all of my clients with mindset work first and then adding that 9 to 5 exit strategy on top later.
Yeah, I like that because I know
Yes.
sometimes I feel the pull, you know, as a newer entrepreneur to like, it's almost this pull to like helplessness. Like I want someone to step in and just do all of the steps for me. I just want to show up and coach. That is what I like doing. And there's a part of me that thinks I shouldn't have to do anything else and that someone else can do it better. So they should just, I want like a savior to come in almost.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the mindset work, it for me has been around, of course you can do this, you can figure this shit out, like trust that you can figure this out. You know, it's just coming back to that self-trust that I can do this, that it's possible, that it doesn't need to be as hard as I'm making it out to be. And it's always funny because these things that I think are so complicated, once I've done the mindset around it, and then I go to do it, I'm like, what was this wasn't that hard to figure out. You know, there's a million YouTube, like you said, you can figure all of this out. There's YouTube videos, there's everything online. But man, the stories that you'll make up that'll keep you from even touching or going to do any action are wild.
The stories are what makes things feel so much more difficult and why we stay in inaction. But like, you know, in some capacity too, like mindset work, like that's, I think why so many of us that coach, it's like, it's not just mindset. It's not just, you know, strategy. It's not just action. It has to be a combination of all those things, because those things feed our brains the evidence that it's safe, right? And that at the core of everything with exiting corporate America is a lot of safety concern. Like it's not
Mhm.
safe to not have a consistent income. And like, yeah, that might be true, but also we just saw in the pandemic how so many people lost their fucking jobs and were blindsided. A lot of people were blindsided. So
Yeah,
like this idea that corporate is safer than entrepreneurship is kind of like now debunked, right? Like that's a myth
yeah,
that's been debunked.
yeah, yeah. And it is so alluring, right? To have this perception of safety that you have this steady paycheck, that you'll be fine. But you're right, it is, you can't guarantee that. Like anything could happen at any moment. And so it's really, becoming in tune with yourself and asking, am I in this corporate job because I really like it, because it like lights me up and I'm happy to be here. It like uses my strengths in a really positive way. Or am I here because I'm scared that I can't do it on my own? Or you feel lost because you haven't given yourself space to even explore what you would even want to do on your own. I think that there's two camps of people who stay in corporate America who don't actually want to be there. And maybe there's more that you can tell me about, but I think from my perception, it's the people who have a dream, want to make something else happen, and are terrified because they want the steady paycheck, they want the health insurance covered, they want all of these things that like the golden, you know, what is it, golden cage gives them?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
the golden handcuffs.
that. And then there's the other side where they want something different. They know this isn't it for them, but they have no idea what they would do. Like, the whole follow your passion. Like, I don't even know what that means. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and so that can almost be even more paralyzing. So like, well, what that's so cool that you just quit and you're like, I just need rest. But it can feel really terrifying to just quit without any form of plan or idea of where you want to go with this.
Yeah, and that's really interesting that you bring that up because I do find that to be very true as well, like those two camps of people. And in my experience, the people that don't know their passions are the ones that tend to have a little bit harder time with like breaking away from corporate America. And that's, like, and anyone that's dealing with that, I always just say, like, you know, if you don't know what your passion is, that's your work. Go find your passion. Start to unpack what you actually like and enjoy. Find some, like, that's actually kind of what I did. Actually, now that you're saying that, is like, I didn't really know what I would do outside of sales. It was like, I didn't anticipate really being an entrepreneur ever in my life. Like, I always believed those stories about, like, oh, I'm not smart enough or whatever, or I'm not business savvy enough. But at the end of the day, I hired a life coach to help me understand what it was that made me tick, and more
Mhm.
importantly, what I could do to find joy. And when I
Yeah.
started to find joy in my life, suddenly things started getting so much more clear around what I loved. I was able to understand that in my corporate job, I loved to mentor, I loved to create events. I love to like listen to new people that came into the business and started like doing the new job that I had already mastered, right? All of those things, I never in a million years would have thought that those would have translated into something so specific. And that's why coaching is like such a huge passion of mine, because it's using all of these skills and these things that I loved about my old job in a different and new way that feels more fulfilling.
I love that. And I love that you said once you kind of started following what you found joy in, that's when you almost started to open up to these ideas or become more expansive. Things started to click. And I mean, I think we all struggle with this a little bit sometimes, is like kind of beating ourselves up, like thinking if we just work harder, then we'll figure these things out. Or if I just work, it's almost like this endless to-do list, or, you almost take on the creative exploring as this burden, like, well, now I need to try this, and this, and then I'll get the answer, instead of being, drawn towards, oh, this is cool, I'm going to explore this without an end result needing to be attached to it.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's so key because we put expectations on ourselves, or we make assumptions that, like, oh, if I don't follow this through, I'm flaky. Or like we'll make little
Mhm.
stories up about that. And that totally inhibits our process. When in reality, It's not that you're flaky, it's just that maybe you don't like it. Like, for example, I don't love to read. Like, I feel like the only coach in the world that doesn't read a whole self-help book all the way through, right? I'm good for like 2 or 3 like chapters tops. After that, I'm tapped out. I have nothing else to read. And like, I don't make that mean anything about me not being like, I don't know, whatever you would think about being if you didn't read a full book, but I don't attach meaning to that. And I think that has taken a lot of time
Mhm.
because corporate America also reinforces those types of things. Like, you have to see things through,
Yeah.
we're only results oriented, yada, yada, yada. But like, no, I just don't buy into that anymore. And so, it's really about learning to create your own stories and taking the power back from what you think you should be doing.
Yeah, I love that. And what are some of the new stories that you've written for yourself and that you've also helped your clients, kind of embody and write for themselves?
Yeah, that you don't have to settle for what is available to you right now, I think is the biggest one. Like, just because you've made it to the top of your corporate career, it doesn't mean that that's the end for you. It doesn't mean that you can't go pursue other things. And, more importantly, that entrepreneurship really isn't that risky. Like, of course, there is some risk, as there is with anything, but it's not as risky as people think. And especially when you're looking at entrepreneurship as an opportunity to serve other people with your gifts, right? It kind of goes back to this idea of like connectors and relationship builders. And that has always been such a big piece of any business, regardless if you're working in corporate America or not. You connecting to people, telling a story, being able to help shift the dynamic and the impact of which we have in the world is always what will drive people to do the things that they want. And you can do that inside corporate America, sure. And you can also do it outside, right? It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah, I so resonate with, I kind of why I created this show is because I want to show people like at any point they can do things differently. And just the way you said, a lot of people come to you, they might have climbed the corporate ladder, like they've reached these heights in their careers. And because of that, it can feel like I don't want to have to start all over again. I don't want to have to come down. I put in a decade, 15 years into this thing. And I think that there's this sunk cost fallacy that people have where they think because they've spent so much time doing this thing, it's not worth shifting, and what I want this show to do, and I'm sure like it feels like your mission is you still have 40 years ahead of you,
Yes.
Would you rather be
Yes.
so unhappy, but like climbing that ladder that you're sticking to? Or would you rather, get off and start again, but building something that really excites you and lights you up and feels fulfilling and uses your gifts to serve humanity?
Yeah, I think about that often because, there's been a part of my journey where I do feel like I'm rebuilding. And it's like, I wish I could just get back to the place I was when I was at the top of the ladder, right? But at the same time, like, it it feels so different this time. Like, I'm okay with slow process. Whereas before, when I was climbing the ladder, I was like, let me get there as fast as I fucking can, because I just think that at the end of the ladder, there's going to be something there that's not available to me now.
Yes.
And like now it's like, no, I'm actually going to slow down and I'm just going to like, yes, I am rebuilding my life. Do I have all of the security that I had before? No, but that's okay. I honor that and it's okay. And I will just keep moving forward. And at some point, I'm going to look back and I'm going to be like, holy fuck, I did it. I rebuilt it. But that's not the end. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
It's not the end. I get to keep going. There is no ceiling as an entrepreneur. You get to keep growing.
Yeah. And I love the invitation to slow down. There is this idea. I mean, there's a lot of pressure around being a certain place by a certain age in our society, or being what success looks like, even, right? Success, it's up to us to define what a successful life is. And it might have nothing to do with money or a career or any of these things. But there's this, especially when we're in the corporate world, there's, the promotion cycles, the salary bumps, it's this, you kind of feel like you're on a treadmill and you're like, I need to keep running. I got to do it. And so there is this kind of pressure just in the atmosphere of like, continue to go up, up, up. And so slowing down can feel really scary or make you feel lazy, or all of the stories around the conditioning you're holding on to that you need to work harder to get ahead. And so it's like, okay, actually sometimes it's way more impactful to slow all the way down, allow yourself to just rest, allow yourself to receive, like allow yourself to open up creatively to see even what the next path is, instead of just running ahead on a path that doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like we're running at things blind when we do that, right?
Mhm.
Because like when we slow down, we get a chance to kind of reassess and decide what feels good and what doesn't. But also, if you're in a state of burnout in corporate America, like that, those feelings are really hard to identify. And
Mm,
part of that is because you think that you should be feeling those things because that's how everybody else is feeling, right? There's like this story that like the more you hustle, the more hours you put in, the better of a worker you are and the more successful you'll be. Or like what I'm learning as part of like this course that I'm taking, which I know you're part of as well, is like, yeah, okay, the more we hustle, sure, you might get more success, but you also might be causing more harm to yourself and
mhm.
perpetuating stories that don't actually serve you, right? And that's hard. That's a hard lesson to learn when you're in the thick of your burnout. Like there's just, I mean, the evidence just shows that people that get what they want in corporate America have worked hard, have done things a certain way. They've put in a lot of hours, they've gotten promotions, they've gotten raises. So it just, again, it perpetuates the cycle.
Yes. And I'm one of the things I'm working to uncoil in myself is this very belief that I need to, and I have nothing against hard work. So it's not that I don't want to work. It's like that I need to like struggle, that I need to like burn the midnight oil to like be successful, or to earn it, to feel like I really earned it. Like
Earn, yeah, that's a good word for that.
the earning, instead of just being like, oh, maybe when I'm following what feels really good, yes, I'm doing the work, quote unquote, the work, but it's like, it just feels easy because I'm like following what innately are my gifts and can be of service to humans, which lights me up and gives me more energy. And so it's like, can I believe that doing that can lead to success and worthiness, that I am worthy and just being human. And that isn't it a celebration of life to do what feels good and to help people. Instead of feeling like it has to be this struggle that I have to earn these things, that if I didn't toil, that it's not worthy, it's not worth anything. And it's deep in there, man.
Yeah. And it, like it's really funny because I distinctly remember that of like, I have to struggle or it was luck. That was like, that's the story in my head forever. And it's like, just like you said, well, actually, no, I'm taking aligned action. So of course it feels easier. And, I think our society loves like a bottom. Now we started from the bottom. Now we're
Yes.
here type of like a type of vibe, right? We love that story of like the underdog that makes it
Yes.
to the top, right? Because they truly struggled for what they got. And that is the American dream.
Yes.
It's like, no, absolutely not. Like that's a story that I'm even still today, still trying to overcome, that it's like, and it even gets to the point where when you're so aware of you loving the story of struggle, that like going into ease feels so fucking hard. It's like, I know I don't want to struggle and I'm okay with not struggling, but how the fuck do I embrace easy? Like it's hard. It's hard to stay in ease.
It really is. It's hard to actually allow yourself to relax sometimes, because there's this part of you that doesn't feel like it's safe or feels guilty for it. So it's trying to like make it harder than it needs to be with endless to-do lists or weird action items that don't actually make any impact and just make you feel busy. So make you feel like you're doing something. And it's like,
Yeah, 100%.
it's laughable, but it's what we all go through.
Totally. And I think that's like important is like we all go through these like moments where we're like, oh, like I always used to think it was just me, right? And I would hear also other people say those types of things. So like when I was in sales, like corporate sales, like if so and so hit their quota, they were lucky. They didn't actually work for it. So it like took away from the fact that they hit their quota. And like as I reflect on that, I'm pretty sure I was part of those conversations and totally said that. But it was like totally out of jealousy, one. And then number two, it was like I'm downplaying someone else's success because of it, because I feel like it's luck, because that's my story about my success.
Yeah.
Like everything I did was luck. I was just happened to be in the right place. It wasn't because I actually worked for it. But, through personal development, through working with coaches, you start to understand that, like, no, everything is aligning for me and I'm going through these lessons in the perfect time. And it's teaching me something about myself, which is I am a fucking hard worker, even if I don't work
Yes.
60 hours a week.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. I want to clarify, this doesn't mean you're not showing up, right?
Right.
It
Right.
doesn't mean you're doing nothing. Like finding ease can mean just showing up and doing the work in a way that just feels good. Like you're taking the aligned action, like you said, you're showing up, you're doing the work, you're being present instead of feeling like it needs to be this struggle, telling yourselves all the reasons why you're wrong, constantly feeling like you need to do more and everything you do is not enough. It's yeah.
Gosh, I was just gonna say something about that and now I just totally lost the thought. Oh, hopefully it comes back.
I understand that. Yeah, it's like, where was I going with that? Slowing down. Oh, releasing old stories. Oh, I did want to mention this. One of my coaches, she said, because I was telling her about this, like feeling kind of guilty almost if, like, I feel like sometimes I hold myself back from success because I feel guilty that my life has been so easy so far. And like, there is this idea that I need to work hard and earn it. And she asked me to try on this frame, and this is so new, so I haven't really like put this into action yet, but I'm excited to try it. She's like, what if you had to earn working hard by having so much pleasure? Like you like enjoyed life, like your first job, quote unquote, was to enjoy life. And then you would then it's like, then you had to like fully absorb that to earn going into like working. So like kind of like flipping it on its head. And I was like, oh my God, what would that be like?
I almost think that would be harder, right? Like, oh my God, because like we're just not conditioned to believe that pleasure is like something that's a necessity. It's like the afterthought usually. Right. And like just allowing yourself joy and pleasure, doesn't that mean that you're lazy and that you don't do anything? And that like, yeah, you're so right. Like it doesn't mean that you're not showing up, because you're fucking certainly showing up. You're just willing to get uncomfortable and do the work and like not make it mean anything if you don't get the immediate result too. You know what I mean? Like I think that's the piece of this that I think a lot of people miss when they jump into entrepreneurship, is they feel like they have to hustle and work all the hours, do all the things. They forget about the pleasure part of it, which is like part of the allure of being an entrepreneur in the first place, is the flexibility, right?
Yes. And I love that I've been having a lot of conversations about expanding my capacity to be uncomfortable. And what you just said, and now I'm realizing like clicking, is a lot of times we're doing this hustle because it actually makes us feel more comfortable than allowing things to be easy. And so it's like our inability to be uncomfortable is causing us to do and go in this cycle. And that's where it's just, we think that we're uncomfortable doing all this hard work, but actually it's more uncomfortable to just be.
Yeah.
And so it's like we're filling our time or going and spinning in these circles because actually weirdly that's more comfortable than
Yeah, I mean, that's just so important to remember, that like your body's innate desire is to stay safe. And so like thinking that through, it's like, okay, which of these two things is actually going to push me closer to the thing that I want? And more importantly, which one feels a little bit more uncomfortable, because that's probably the things that we should be doing, right? And when we let fear run the show, we're conditioned to believe that fear means something that's bad. That if you're feeling fear, there's something wrong. In reality, it's the opposite. When you feel fear, it means you're onto something. It means that you're pushing your growth edge, which in entrepreneurship, you're constantly doing. So you end up actually like helping yourself out if that's your desire, because you just learn to be uncomfortable all the goddamn time. And it doesn't get easier, but you do learn to like push the edge and be okay with that and know that the discomfort is just part of the process and that there's actually nothing wrong with you or with what's happening in your life.
Yeah. And I just want to tie the discomfort part, because the reason I started examining this in my own life was looking at ways like, why do I, when does my people pleasing show up? Like, why do I, feel like I need to make everyone around me so comfortable? And I was like, hard truth. Yes, I don't want them to be uncomfortable. I don't want them to be disappointed, angry, feel bad in any way. But really, it's because I'm so uncomfortable with them being uncomfortable that I'll do anything to like not have that conflict. So it really has nothing to do with the other person and everything to do with my inability to be uncomfortable.
I so resonate with that. I mean, I am a people pleaser myself, and I just resonate that with that deeply. Like, I don't want anyone to ever feel uncomfortable. Like, I feel like I could handle it. Like, I feel like I could handle your uncomfort. So I'll put myself, or your discomfort, I'll put myself out there to make you feel comfortable, and I'll absorb it just so that I don't have to deal with the discomfort of like silence, or like you not resonating with what I'm saying, or like what I'll like go to the ends of the earth to make this feel good for us, even if it makes me feel slightly uncomfortable, because the alternate approach would be like worse.
Yeah. Well, and it's hilarious because like originally I thought I was operating because I care so deeply for others. I always want them to feel their most free, expansive, loving selves or whatever. Because that was kind of the story I was going to. And then I was really diving in. And yes, of course, I want that for others, but really it's because it makes me wildly uncomfortable to think others are uncomfortable. And I'm like, oh my God, like, and it doesn't serve them either, because then you do the thing where, you do whatever they want or whatever, you show up in it this way that you don't actually want to be showing up in. And so then you're a little bit resentful, even though they never asked you to do that. It's like, so that's not good for them and it's not good for you. Yeah.
That's a powerful like realization that you've had, like really powerful. And like I think that's like the thing about entrepreneurship too, is that like you uncover, I don't know if it's because we're coaches or if this is like just true about like the work that we do, but like as a coach, I've literally learned so much about myself
Mm-hmm.
that it's not only uncomfortable, but it's like confronting, right? Of like, I thought I knew who I was. I'm fucking 35 years old almost. Like, I feel like I should know who I am. And the reality is that I'm just really starting to discover who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And, just because you work your entire life to like your mid 30s to with like this vision, you still have, back to the point we had earlier, which was like, you still have 50 potentially years left to live your life. Like you still have over half of your life to live. Why not live it with intention and purpose and knowing who the fuck you are and doing the things that you actually want to do? Because on your deathbed, is what they say all the time. Never been on my deathbed, but I can guess that, and like what I've heard is that people will say, I wish I would have done something different. And that was the deciding factor. I remember a conversation with my husband when we were deciding whether or not we were going to move to Colorado and quit my job. Like, what do we want to do? Like, would we look back when we're 90 on our deathbeds wishing we would have taken more risks? And the answer was yes. Like, I want to take risks. I don't want to live safe anymore. It feels boring.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not ready to just settle already. I'm too young to settle, right? And I hope that that's like encouraging for all of the listeners and watchers, because you don't have to settle. Like your life is not over just because you got to the freaking like top of your game. Like we've seen it so many times before. There's so much evidence that people can create their life at an older age and follow what feels better for them and still be wildly successful.
And I also want to point out that you did this with the baby. Mm-hmm. Because I think there's also not only climbing the corporate ladder, but this story of now I have a family. And so I have more responsibility. And of course, that is true. That's absolutely true. And you can still do it if you have this burning desire. You can still shift things. You can still take risks. You are a living, breathing example of someone who did that.
Yeah. And I honestly think that like my son was the reason why. Like I did not want him to grow up looking at me like I was miserable, right? Like I was trapped. Like I just like that was never like I felt like that in my own relationship to like some of like my parents, which was like I felt like a burden and I felt like they just had to do things for me, right? And I never wanted my parents to feel that way, and I certainly don't want my son to feel that way, right? So it also gives our children permission to do things differently as well, right? And like as we're seeing with the world and society, like people are not going to college anymore. People are totally shifting how they are going to use their gifts. We're going to trade schools. We're focusing more on our specific skill sets. And so we're seeing that shift in the world. And now the children that are coming up in the next generation are going to feel empowered to do so much differently than what we were taught to do.
Totally. I totally feel that there's a more entrepreneurial thing in the ethos for kids these days, because I mean, obviously the internet and like all of these different things have created so many different paths that you can take, and so many more examples of people who are doing things differently, that are following their path, following just what excites them, and are like surprised and delighted that they can make money from it, you know?
Yes. I mean, look at all of the inventions. I mean, you have inventions that I never would have thought of, or like silly things, but they're like game changers, right? Like I saw this like lacrosse ball that sticks to the wall. And I used to do CrossFit back in the day. And I just remember the most annoying thing about that was like, I couldn't get to the parts of my body that were so sore because the ball wouldn't stay on the goddamn wall. And somebody came up with that. Like, that's an amazing invention. And thankfully we have this entrepreneurial spirit that's come about as a result of the things that our society has been going through. And we've gotten so much more inventive, and it's really, I think, going to pave a path for the next generations to come.
I love that. And I also just wanted to quickly touch base on the bus life.
Yes.
Like, what inspired that? How did you decide to do that with a baby? And what were your biggest like lessons or takeaways from that?
So what inspired it was the fact that we were just paying so much money in rent in Colorado. It was so expensive to live there. And my husband is an architect by trade. Like that's what he went to school for. And so he's always been really interested in mobile architecture. Well, of course, YouTube has been a big part of that, where people are sharing their lives living in a bus or a van and kind of making it work, right? And so our thought was, well, hey, we'll save money. We'll live on our savings a little bit longer, which would give us more time to get my business off the ground. So why not? Like, let's just give it a go. And yeah, like, I don't know, honestly, what I was thinking, because doing bus life with a child was hard. Like, I think when I see people on YouTube do it, I'm like, that is amazing. And usually they have 2 kids so that they can entertain each other. But that was actually the catalyst of like why we ended up leaving bus life and not doing it anymore, was because my son was getting to an age where he really needed to be around children. He needed to get like that interaction, because he was bored. He would be like, we'd be at a playground. He'd be like, hey kid, like he was nervous. Right. And so we decided to kind of forgo bus life just for him and for his development, but also because it was really, really uncomfortable to be living in a bus. I mean, the temperature changes, you're dealing with following weather patterns. I mean, I remember sleeping in our bus in like 10-degree weather in Michigan. It was miserable. Yeah. They don't talk about that stuff on YouTube, by the way. Like, nobody ever shares these types of things, but we did see beautiful places. We got to experience a lot of beautiful things. And that was like my lesson in all of that in bus life, was just that like, you can have a dream and it cannot work out, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you will bounce back and it's fine. I mean, I was embarrassed because we created a whole Instagram. We took people along on our build. Like, we did all the things that all of the YouTubers do. And it was embarrassing to be like, well, we're packing up shop and going back home. Like, it was embarrassing, but it also, I think, opens up permission. And now we use the still, we just part-time, like we just go. I still consider myself a nomad because we travel every single month almost, and in the bus, and we just do it for shorter periods of time, and it works. And like, that's the other thing, is like, things like, you can make things work for you and around what you need, which is also like what I was going to say earlier. Now that it's coming back to me, is like, you know, as we're thinking about building out a business or becoming an entrepreneur, one of the things I teach is that you get to do it in your own way, and it doesn't have to look like anyone else's journey. We really want to build your business and your life around you, not the opposite.
Yes. So much permission in that. I love the gift you just gave of, you can have a dream and be doing it and realize actually that's not what you want to be doing, and so much permission to let it go and move on to what feels more aligned instead of feeling like you work this hard to get here. Now you kind of have to force yourself to be in this thing.
Yes.
And also with the business, like, yes, around building it around you, because it's so easy to forget that we go into business wanting to do it in a way that feels good to us, because we start seeing all these things and think we have to do it a certain way to be successful.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I like Peloton, so I'm like an avid Pelotoner, and there's a instructor, her name's Jess Sims, and she always says this, like, no ego, amigo. And it makes so much sense to me because like we will do things just to save ego and just to be like, I can do it. Again, going back to the story of like hard, like I'm willing to do this because it'll mean something, like I'm really hardworking or I can make it through things.
Mhm.
But also on the flip side of that, like that's the ego driving the entire situation.
Yeah.
And like, I'm so glad I didn't stick it out. Like, who knows where I would have been if we decided to keep going best life. I would be miserable, like, so just honor what you need and know that
Yes.
that's okay. There's no need to have your ego involved in every aspect of your life.
Yes. Oh, love that. Well, I just want to end here with, if you have any last words for budding entrepreneurs or for women in corporate who like have a desire to get out, do you have any like parting words for them to help them kind of do things differently?
Yeah. Hold the faith and keep going.
Mm.
Hold the faith. Think bigger than yourself. There is a universal energy that is shifting the dynamic of the way that our world works. And if you are feeling that call, it's intentional. It's not by luck. It's not by chance. If you're feeling that pull, there's a very specific reason. So I'd invite you to just keep following it, keep scratching that itch, and get curious. And if you feel lost in that process, get support. There are hundreds of coaches out there, local, online, whatever. I mean, shit, like I know I have spots coming up in my coaching business. You have spots in yours. So get support from people that are like-minded and that have done this, because there is no need to do it alone. Like that is not the story that we're perpetuating here. Doing it alone does not make it easier. It doesn't make you a like cooler person or whatever. Get support and feel that support in your life. Learn to receive that piece of life, like that's something that you've probably never allowed yourself. Allow yourself that support, and just know that on the other side of you edging into this discomfort is such a beautiful life. Even if it's not exactly how you anticipated it turning out, it will be so worth it, I promise you.
Oh, I love that. And on that note, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I have a free Facebook group where I go live. I talk about lead generation strategy, getting your first client, content marketing, all kinds of things for new business owners. Really focused on, creators, creatives, and then coaches. So that's at Facebook, and then you can find it at Embracing the Uncertain. And then I also post a lot of my content on Instagram. I am obsessed with Instagram, so you can go ahead and follow me there at Embracing the Uncertain.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for showing up. And I hope everyone goes to find you at the uncertain.
Yep.
And yeah, and this is a really powerful conversation. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a great conversation. Like, you're amazing, and I love you so much.